This is Suit Up Sports.
Suit Up Sports.
Where opinions are as sharp as a tailored suit. No fluff, no gimmicks, just unfiltered, hard-hitting takes on sports and a whole lot more. It's time to suit up. Now here's your host, DJ the Suit Stout.
Welcome to Suit Up Sports. I'm DJ the Suit Stout, along with 10-year NFL vet Frank Garcia and Big D behind the board over there producing the show. Frank, how you doing there? Still at the beach, I see.
I'm doing great, buddy. I appreciate it. I had a great Easter. Hope everybody else did as well. And, it was just a great time to come out here and celebrate and enjoy our weekend. And I'm in Ocean Lakes in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, just outside of Myrtle Beach. And I've never been here before. And I tell you, the Airbnb I'm staying at is absolutely incredible. There's so many really nice places here. When you think you're going camping, right, especially in Myrtle Beach, you don't think of a place like Ocean Lakes. You really don't. You think of, okay, there's going to be tents. There's going to be trash everywhere. Everybody's just going to kind of survive with those little outdoor shower areas. But this place is absolutely spectacular. Gigi, I know you've been here quite a bit. There's lakes everywhere.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I don't even know when's the last time because there's so much construction going on with these new houses. And it's like there's like 30, 40 acres of park. And there's water slides. There's lazy rivers. There's fishing. There's doing s'mores. There's activities for the kids on a daily routine.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like this is like inspired me to maybe even move down here. This might be my next.
Man, I tell you what, I love to fish, and me and my two boys go fishing quite a bit, and on the North Carolina or South Carolina coast, and I've been known to be hunting for a nice little center console, skiff, and a place to keep it down there, and dude, so we can go fishing.
I saw somebody pull out a 5-pound largemouth bass out of one of the lakes here.
Wow.
Catch and release, but still, I mean, you get a 5-pound out here, and that's something that kids are going to get excited about.
Oh, no doubt, man. We love it. We love down there. And obviously, I've got the music festival, Carolina Country Music Festival in Myrtle Beach. So I've been going to Myrtle since I was 2 years old, and the dirty Myrtle, whatever you want to call it, I love it. So I'm glad.
This is not even dirty. This is like, I know exactly what you're talking about. That's what my expectations were, DJ, is that, going through like North Myrtle is normally where I stay, and it's a little bit more bougie. You got the nicer places, et cetera, et cetera. Then you go into Dirty Myrtle and you got the campgrounds and you got, nothing against Walmart. Love Walmart.
Hey, I've stayed at all those campgrounds. Trust, that's where I grew up. So I'm not downing them at all. Yeah. I've been in all of them. Further
south, almost to Murrells Inlet. And, Ocean Lakes is sitting right there on the left-hand side, right on the ocean. Yep. I mean, literally I could throw a rock back in the day, to the ocean. I can't reach it now, but, it's only about, not even a row away. And it's walking distance. I can see the kids playing over at the playground right now, and everybody's outside. And they do something really cool, which I was a little hesitant to begin with. And I don't know if you knew this, but everybody starts off with a golf cart. This is a big golf cart community. So the golf carts come running around, and everybody sits there. And at night, every single night, everybody gets on like a golf cart parade. And the tradition is that, you see, they're moving my truck in right now. It's a little rider right here with a moving truck right behind me. They have a golf cart that everybody goes and rides around this parade. They play music, they meet and greet. But the tradition is everybody kind of slaps hands as they go by. And I'm pretty to myself already as it is. And I'm like, I don't want to touch anybody's hand, man. So, the first night I'm like, I'm not touching anybody. I'm looking straight ahead. I'm avoiding everybody when they come by. Everybody's reaching their hand out, and I'm kind of like ducking away. By the second or third night, I'm out there high-fiving everybody and handing out candy and glow sticks. So,
yeah,
it's a treat out here. It really is. It's a lot of fun.
Well, the weather was great there. The weather was great here in Charlotte. Beautiful weekend, and I got to check out a lot of the NBA stuff. Playoffs, which started this weekend. Got to watch the Carolina Hurricanes yesterday and their playoff game in game one, and they got off to a great start. They got out to an early 3-0 lead and kind of cruised from there. So hockey is one of those sports that I watch it enough during the season to be dangerous, but not a whole lot. But once it gets to the playoff time, I'm locked in on it. And the last few years, I've been lucky enough to actually go down to a playoff game. And I mean, there's not many better atmospheres than that. But I tell you, one thing I did this weekend that was really cool. And if you haven't done it yet, this is the third game I've been to. Saturday, my wife and I went out to the Charlotte FC soccer game, and first of all, they're in first place, so they got a great team. So it's always more fun to go watch a team when they're really good. And in Charlotte, we haven't had that opportunity in a long time because
since 2015.
It's been a long time. And so, number one, they're really good. They were playing San Diego, who was also a really good team. But we went with a couple friends of ours who had tickets in what is called the Vault. And I had not been in the Vault area. It's a new area, I guess, they made in the stadium. And you're literally on the field. So it's not the ones in the end zone, which is called the gallery. This is like right on half midfield. The players run by right through you as they go out to the field to play. And you're like literally 10 feet away from the field of play. And then it's free drinks and food and all that stuff. The weather was perfect. And, the Charlotte FC did very similar to what the Hurricanes did. They jumped out to a 3-0 lead. It could have been 8-0. San Diego's goalie made some saves that were just incredible. But the Charlotte FC team is a lot of fun to watch. And then Friday night, Chris and I went out and saw the Anthem RC, which is the rugby professional football team here. And we're doing some stuff with them and brought some clients out there. They play at Memorial Stadium, which is, if you've never been there, it's an old stadium in the heart of Charlotte. Great stadium. I played in all-star soccer games there growing up as a kid. And my son Connor played football. You coached football game there.
They just renovated that stadium because it fell in and about killed some people there about 5-6 years ago.
Well, the main reason they renovated it was because to play soccer there, it wasn't wide enough. So when I used to play soccer there, like if you had a corner kick, the dude had to like literally stand with his back against the wall and like just toe it. Like he couldn't get any foot behind it. So they had to make it wider. But man, I don't know anything about rugby. And this is the second game I've been to this year. And we brought a bunch of people with us that had not been, some clients and some friends. And man, it's a good time. And those dudes knock the crap out of each other. There's no pads. And now that I'm actually starting to kind of understand it a little bit, Patrick, the president of the team, brought us down to the field, introduced us to some players, kind of gave us a quick intro to rugby. And anyway, so I did rugby on Friday, soccer on Saturday. I don't think I've ever had a rugby soccer weekend in my life, but we had a blast and the weather was fantastic. And then to sprinkle in some NBA playoffs, I don't know how much of that you got to watch, obviously being on vacation, running around with the kids, but there was some really bad games and there's some really good games. The game that stood out to me right away was the Denver Nuggets against the Clippers. The Nuggets, obviously one of the best teams in the NBA. Jokic, one of the best players, if not the best player in the NBA. Clippers, though, playing really good basketball. James Harden is the James Harden of old. He's playing great basketball. Kwame Leonard is back and seems to be healthy. They've got a really good team. They were actually I think they were getting 1 point or 1.5 point going in there, which I thought was kind of weird. Well, the Clippers led darn near the whole game. Nuggets came back and won by 2 in overtime. But they play tonight, and the Clippers are favored by 1.5. So it just shows you how evenly matched they think this team is. Now let's go to not evenly matched. Oklahoma City beat the Grizz by 51 points. I don't ever remember, and I did some research. There has been, I think, 2 other games in the playoffs where a team has won by 50 or more points. But are you kidding me? Especially this Memphis team with, John Morant, who wants to either do a gun signal or a grenade signal, very brash. They're chippy with everybody, talk all this junk, and then to go lose by 51 in game 1. Now, OKC is the best team in the NBA, and there's no question about it. They are unbelievable. Not only do they just hit every single draft choice they make, they develop players, and they're a team. Like you see these guys, and it's been this way for the last couple of years. They're young. When one guy does an interview after the game, the rest of the team is behind them. And like they're the kind of team that when we always talk about NIL and portal, and we'll talk about a little bit of that in a second, but when I watch them play, it reminds me of the teams that I grew up playing on, where, you're with each other every weekend, every day at practice. This is before cell phones, obviously, right? But, you spend all your time together. It's a true family. And that's what they remind me of. And not only do they have more talent than anybody, when you've mixed talent with heart and loyalty and effort and on the same page, they're going to be tough to beat.
Well, DJ, it's funny because I think, one of the things that the NBA has really been missing is the face of the face of the league to really be the best player that works the hardest, that is the best representative. And, I know that Jordan has his issues off the court. Kobe had his issues off the court. But, since those two guys, you could maybe throw a couple of more names in the hat. Steph Curry might be the guy, but the guys that work the hardest, the guys that are the most professional, the guys that show up every day. There's a difference between NBA athletes or NFL athletes and NBA professionals or NFL professionals. And the difference is what you just described, is that they're going to show up every day. They're going to commit. They're going to go about their business. They're going to be the first ones there, the last ones to leave, and they're going to demand excellence of everybody else on that team. And that's the problem I have with the NBA. When you look at these 50-point blowouts and you look at a guy that has all the potential and all the ability in the world like Morant, they're more interested in the showmanship and the gunslinger and the me, look at me type of mentality than they are, hey, listen, I don't really care about me. Let's worry about winning a championship. Nobody's there to win a championship. They show up and expect to, win the game. That's called entitlement. They expect to win the title. That just doesn't happen like that. And that's what's good to see about some of the teams that still have, the professionalism. I think that's why Golden State's going to be a tough out. You're going to have to beat them if you want to beat them.
I mean, look, they were playing. They opened last night at Houston. Houston's a very good young team. Obviously, not much experience. Very good coach. Boston Celtics old coach. But the Golden State team that Houston drew in the playoffs, they kind of got screwed because this ain't the same Golden State team that lost all those games early in the year. When they added Jimmy Butler, they became a completely different team. And it was weird because Houston was favored by 1.5 last night. Golden State ends up winning by 10. Very low scoring game, 95-85. Both of those teams play good defense. But you're right. I mean, Golden State is a team that's going to play. And look, Oklahoma City, if you're not an NBA fan, and anyone that's listening or watching this, if you're not an NBA fan, and I get it because I used to be a diehard NBA fan. This is the first year in my life that I haven't went to a Hornet game. I just couldn't stand it anymore because I'd go to a game and none of the stars were playing, and I just couldn't stand it. And you watch Oklahoma City play, it reminds me, at least, of some of the really good college teams. When you would watch a team like the old Duke teams, the old Carolina teams, the old UConn teams, those really great college teams that just played together, hand slapping the floor on defense. That's what OKC reminds me of, man. They're just a young, fun team that they're on the same page. So if you haven't watched them, and they'll play tomorrow night, I believe, give them a shot and just see. I'm sure Memphis Grizzlies are going to show up a lot more this next game than they did in this one, at least. I would hope so. John Moran after the game said, that we've never played that bad before. We'll never play that bad again. But yeah, OKC does it the right way, and you can't say that about.
I hope not. I don't want to
they play. Yeah. Exactly.
I mean, you can't play much better. You can't play much worse than what they played. So
exactly. Luka and LeBron, hosting the Minnesota Timberwolves, and Minnesota takes care of them 117-95. So all these people that thought the Lakers were going to be a team to contend, maybe they will be, but I'll tell you what, Minnesota punched them in the mouth. And you talked about faces of the league, and when you hear these NBA experts, and you and I have talked maybe 2 minutes of NBA on our show, but when you listen to these NBA experts talk about who the next face of the league is, they all say that, well, first of all, it needs to be an American. Okay, so you don't want it to be a foreigner who has a hard time speaking English. Okay, I get that. Secondly, you want it to be somebody who does things the right way on and off the court. And they throw names out there. And, from a talent standpoint, Anthony Edwards from Minnesota, I mean, you watch that dude play, man, and he's as close to Michael Jordan as you're going to see. He doesn't want the face of the league. He doesn't want it, so you take him off the list. There's a guy out there that I know you and I would guess most of the people watching or listening right now would love to have as the face of the league, as well as the Charlotte Hornet, Cooper Flagg, who just this morning announced that he's going to the NBA. So the Hornets, I think they're going to be the third or fourth highest percentage, but it's not a lot. It's like a 12% chance of getting the first pick. NBA owes us, the NBA owes the Hornets franchise something. But man, if they could get Cooper Flagg, he's the guy that could be the face of the league. Kneppel, by the way, just on that same topic from Duke, also announced he's going pro. Duke's had several other kids enter the portal. So, here goes the what we've been seeing, of rebuilding through the portal. The Carolina Tar Heels right now, I looked at their potential starting lineup the other day, and I think 3 or 4 of them are through the portal. But they lacked size this year, and everybody agreed that was their biggest issue is lack of size. They're not lacking size this upcoming season. They got a 7-3 starter, a 7-5 starter, the kid from Arizona that transferred. They're going to have no problem with size. I don't know if they're going to be able to drop it in the bucket, but they're going to rebound and block shots. But it'll be interesting to see. But yeah, Cooper Flagg did announce this morning, which everyone saw it was coming. I don't think anybody for 1 minute thought that he was not going to go pro. There was some word that he was worried that he would get drafted by the Wizards or a team that he didn't want to go to. I think that Utah's got the best odds at getting him, and I think the Hornets, like I said, are third or fourth. But anyway, back to the NBA and the face of the league. I don't know who it is. I mean, Steph Curry's on the downside of his career, even though he's still unbelievable. He had a shot last night. Like it was almost a fadeaway, out of bounds 3-point shot with the defender and Jalen Green in his face, and he just drained him. He's still as good as anybody in the league, and they're dangerous. The Knicks came back from 21 points to beat Detroit. Detroit plays that old school tough basketball too. They're pushing and shoving, wanting to fight, play good defense, and the Knicks they kind of got them on their heels, I believe, in the first half. But Brunson, who's just a great player, brought them back in the fourth quarter. Cavaliers took care of the Heat, smoked them pretty good. Pacers beat the Bucks, and that game got chippy. A couple almost fights in that game, and Damian Lillard, the point guard for the Bucks, who's missed I think the last 2 or 3 months, will be back for the next game. He was talking trash, so that's kind of stuff that's at least going to intrigue me on 2 teams I normally could care less about. But anyway, the NBA playoffs are rolling, and watch OKC. I guarantee you'll if you like basketball, you'll at least enjoy them playing. I don't know if you got to see any golf yesterday, but Justin Thomas, who had about as up and down as the weekend as you're going to see. I think on Thursday at Harbor Town shoots a 59 or I don't know. I think it was the lowest score that's ever been shot there, or one of the lowest. And he looked like he was on his game. Then the next day, or it was Saturday, he took a penalty against himself because as he was removing, something in the sand or whatever, his ball moved. So he took a penalty on himself. He had another shot where his ball was in the water, and you could see the top of the ball sticking out. So he decides instead of taking a penalty, he's going to hit it. And pretty doggone good shot, but, hit it right out of the water, which could have been a disaster. And then yesterday comes from behind and puts it into a playoff and hits the longest putt that he's ever made to win a tournament. And it was pretty cool. On the way up to the putt, I think the putt was a 25-foot putt. And on the way up to the putt, he tells his caddy, who's not his normal caddy, his filling caddy, that, I've never made a putt to win a tournament. And he goes up there and he hits this 25-foot putt just right in the center of the cup. He hasn't won since 2022. So, he's one of those guys that golf, if you like to watch golf, is a lot more fun when Justin Thomas is playing well. And
he does a great job on there's a YouTube golf channel that he and a couple other guys, YouTube golfers, go around and they play with Phil Mickelson. They play with JT, and they play with different pros, and it's one of those things that's fun to watch because they kind of talk and have a good time, as they're playing around. And JT is one of those guys, when he's feeling it, it's going in. And he was talking with within this round, and he's kind of walking us through what his thought process is. And he goes, well, he's trying to play it up a little bit because the guy he's playing against, he wanted to make it seem like it was some difficult shot, and I don't know how he's going to get it close, and it's impossible. And then he comes back, and as the camera is away from the other guy, his opponent, and he's over there talking with his caddy, he goes, "It's really not that hard. I just heard him. If I don't get this within inside a foot or so, I'm going to be disappointed." And he makes it, right?
Wow.
And then he's like, and he starts hamming an egg, and the other guy's like, "Oh my God, that's a once in a million shot." He made him seem like the shot was a lot harder than it was. But, JT played really well in spurts in the Masters as well. And,
he did.
that's kind of a tournament that's indicative. If you play well there, you're going to play well anywhere, because it's a true test of your distance control, your putting, and you have to be accurate off the tee off the tee. And that's one place going to test your entire golf game. And it's funny when you play there and you go play another course, you go play another round somewhere else. It's easy to see. The game kind of slows down a little bit. And I've had fortunate chance to play that 2 or 3 times Augusta. So once you play that, it's like playing in the wind, and then the next game it's going out there and everything's calm, right? It feels like it's an easier game than really what it should be. And I think that's for JT kind of what he experienced this week. He took some momentum from Augusta and he carried it over to the Heritage. And I played that course as well. Harbor Town's a great golf course. It's really narrow. It's really narrow. You don't have to hit a lot off the tee, so it puts the shot makers in play. And he's definitely that. That's where JT kind of he flourishes. He's not as long as DeChambeau and some of these other guys that are out there, but Rory's another example. When the last hole of Augusta, the perfect example of what I'm talking about with the length. Rory has a pitching wedge, and Justin Rose is hitting like an 8-iron. Justin Rose hits a great shot, but JT stiffs it because the ball doesn't release. It hits where it lands. It stays where it hits. Where Justin Rose, ball hit and release, and he didn't get the break that he was looking for. So when you can hit it close and don't have to hit it far, you bring the field back to you. That's where JT really accelerates. When his putter gets going, him and Jordan Spieth both, when their putters get going, I don't know if there's anybody better than those two at making shots.
Yeah, and you mentioned the YouTube part of that. It's amazing how golfers that have embraced the YouTube and the social media portion of what they do. Bryson DeChambeau is a perfect example of it because he went from kind of a villain, kind of an awkward guy. People didn't like him and all these things. And then he starts doing all these things on YouTube with the break 50, where he brings the celebrity out there with him. They try to break 50. And then he did the thing, chipping the ball over his house, where every day for however many days he chipped a ball until he got a hole in one. And he's also doing it with one of the buddies that I was with the other night and client was telling me that Bryson does this thing where he goes on Temu, the app where you can buy stuff, for cheap.
Oh, yeah, I'm very familiar that Jess, my fiance, she uses it quite a bit. So
well,
that Temu and Shein are the two things that are more delivered to our house than anything else.
Well, he uses Temu, and what he does is he goes on there evidently and buys golf. Bryson goes on there and he buys golf equipment. So he'll buy a wedge or a driver or whatever, and then he'll take it out on the course and he'll show you how it hits. And I mean, he's buying these things. The example that my buddy gave me the other day was that he went out and tested I think it was a 60-degree wedge or something. Mm-hmm. And DeChambeau takes it out there and he tests it and breaks it down. Yep, it's good for this, good for that, blah blah blah. And I think my buddy went on and bought it on Temu for like $8.
Yeah.
And so I guess Temu's loving it because all this golf equipment is getting sold through there for very cheap. Now, he said that like the gunmetal on the front of the wedge looks like it's going to be, worn out, in probably 6 months. But anyway, I think it's pretty smart that Bryson is doing that. He ought to come out with his own set of, $100 clubs and, and sell them to average golfers who just want to learn. This week on Thursday night is one of our favorite nights of the year, and we haven't talked about it yet, but we talked a lot about it on Friday. We're going to talk a lot about it today, and then obviously throughout the week, Thursday and Friday. Michael Kaye from the Charlotte Observer, who covers the Carolina Panthers and the NFL for the Observer, is going to join us here in a little while, but it's NFL Draft Week. And Thursday night, round one, the NFL does it differently now than they used to, but it's round one on Thursday night. And then Friday night, you get rounds, I think, 2 and 3.
Do you like it that way? It's obviously become much more of a production where it's a 3-day event versus a 2-day event. And kind of, what it used to be was just, that Saturday, Sunday, and you're done. Now it's a Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And it's a little bit more theatrics when it comes to the first round, but it lasts all the way through almost to midnight by the time your team drafts, especially if you're late.
Well, and that's the thing. the Panthers are picking at number 8, and it's no secret that, Dan Morgan has said on record that they would be very interested in moving down. I was reading an article this morning where a couple of these, experts were talking about certain teams that they think you could see move down. The Panthers were on every one of those lists as a team that is almost motivated to move down. And there's been some developments, just in the last couple of days when you read the different beat writers or guys like Adam Schefter or people like that. As far as who may go where. And, there's a few spots in the first round that are really going to play a big part of that. And Giants at number 3, because everyone thinks Cam Ward's going to Tennessee. First pick, go ahead and throw it up there. Second pick, everyone believes that Travis Hunter is going to Cleveland Browns. Go ahead and put it up there. The third pick is where it gets interesting, because if you're the Giants, excuse me, you could take Abdul Carter, who's one of the top 3 players rated on everybody's board, defensive ends, got all the size, speed, everything. Or you could go quarterback with Shedeur Sanders, who they've been tied to. They've worked him out, I think, 5 times. They were at Colorado 3 or 4 times during the season. They signed Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, so there's not as big of a need to get a quarterback right there. Everyone does agree the Giants will take a quarterback at some point in time, but number 3 is going to be interesting. They also need a running back, and Genty's sitting there, and they see what Barkley did for the Eagles when he left the Giants this year, and Genty is pretty much consensus to be by far the best running back in this draft, which is a very deep running back draft.
I think the other thing the Giants need, and the reason why Barkley didn't have much success there, is they need an offensive line that can block, right? And that's
no doubt.
That, we always want to talk about the sexy picks with the receivers and the quarterbacks and the defensive ends and the running backs, the guys that touch the ball, but you forget about the guys that block for the guys that touch the ball. And really, in my opinion, what the Giants need is they need to get back to the basics. They need to get back to running the football, stopping the run, and They had the cream of the crop. They had the best running back in the league, and I don't think it's even close with Saquon. And he wasn't able to have success there. You see the success he has when he goes and finds an offensive line that has the ability to move guys out of the way. He's gonna make things happen in space, and he's gonna break tackles one-on-one against safeties. And that's the difference. So before the Giants can get any running back, before the Giants, decide to get any quarterback, they better get some guys that can block. And I don't know if that's through free agency or if it's through the draft, but to me, that's the biggest deficiency the Giants have.
Well, they improved their offensive line last year, not nearly as much as the Panthers did, right? I mean, those were the 2 worst offensive lines in football. You mentioned Saquon going to the Eagles, where he went to the best offensive line, and you see what he did. But the Giants offensive line was improved last year, but definitely still needs some work. I mean, they've got an all-pro left tackle. He just doesn't stay healthy. So, and there are 2 left tackles that everyone believes is going to be really good that would be there for them. But everyone seems to think that the Giants are going to go Abdul Carter or Shedeur Sanders or trade down. There's a lot of people thinking that they want to trade down. And then you've got Dart, who, a lot of people think could go to the Giants. Maybe they've been a smoke screen all this time. They say Daboll loves them, the head coach of the New York Giants. And then you've got the Saints at number 9 after the Panthers, who everyone thinks will probably take a quarterback. But one of the curveballs, and I'm interested to talk to Mike Kaye about this from the Charlotte Observer when we have him on here in a little bit, is one of the guys who I like a lot, and the more you read about him, the more you like about him, is the defensive tackle Mason Graham from Michigan. And most mock drafts, coming into these last couple of days, had him going to Jacksonville at 5. Pretty much everyone, that was their guy. Well, today I read several things, including some by some of the big dog, insiders, whatever, that believe that they could throw a curveball there, that Mason Graham may not be the pick, that it could be Tet McMillan, because evidently, their GM and their head coach are very enamored with tall receivers. Their head coach just came from Tampa Bay, where they had Mike Evans. So there's some rumors that maybe that could be the pick there. Genty could be the pick there. So they're left tackle. So they're kind of now coming into the equation where if they don't take Mason Graham, now all of a sudden you got the Raiders, right? And everyone seems to think they're going to take Genty. You got the Jets. Everyone seems to think they're taking the tight end from Penn State, Tyler Warren. if you're the Panthers and you're sitting there, and again, this is one of the questions I want to ask Mike Kaye when he joins us. But if you're the Panthers at number 8 and Mason Graham and Jalen Walker are there, what do you do? Because if you trade down, like a lot of people think the Panthers will do, neither one of them are going to be there, unless you trade down maybe 2 spots, 3 spots. But if you trade back into the mid-teens or a little bit later than that, both those guys will be gone. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. If you take a Mason Graham and you stick him in there with Derek Brown, and then Wharton, the free agent defensive tackle that they signed from Kansas City, and Robinson, who had a great year for the Panthers last year, who's a run stopper. Now all of a sudden that defensive line is stout. Now you're still lacking pass rushing, which this is a pretty deep draft, 2nd and 3rd round. You could do that, but Jalen Walker's the guy that, and you and I haven't spoke since our show Friday, but I talked to a buddy who works in the personnel department for an NFL team on Friday afternoon. And we were just, I was picking his brain about a lot of the players and what he thought. And he happened to go to that workout for Georgia last week where Mikael Williams and Jalen Walker worked out. And he said, man, I liked Walker on tape. I love the fact that every big game and every time they needed a big play, he was the dude that did it. Like he loves his makeup. So because I went into it already liking him, but I was, he's only 6'1.5" and doesn't have the longest arms, and he's kind of played a couple different positions in college. He said, man, he only worked out for 20 minutes. He worked out at 4 different positions, and you would understand this more than me. I know defensive end, but the Mike backer and then some other kind of backer, you would have understood it.
Well, here's the will backer, probably base, get to cover the flats, open his hips up. They want to see if he's going to be able to zone blitz or come off the edge. They want to see, what his coverage skills are at. If he can sink his hips and restart and get out of a break. And then, some of the other things that he's able to do as well. The stunts, the blitzes. You read a route to get a, like I said, a receiver breaks out of a running back out of the backfield breaks, and he's able to cover him. Stop, start type of thing. Stop, move his hips, drive, open his hips, flip his hips. Just see his athleticism. And I watched a lot of that film as well. He was hitting a bag, driving a sled, turning it, and ripping through. Getting up the field. Then he was running around the bags. Getting in and out of breaks. The guy is a great athlete. There's no doubt about it. The only thing that concerns me again is the fact that he's 6'1", 200, and he's slight. He's a slight frame. And in the NFL, unlike college, every one of these guys are athletic. All these left tackles that he plays against are going to be 6'6", 6'7", and are going to be the elite athletes of this world. And that's the thing, is that in college you're gonna play some slumpy guys. You're gonna play some doughboys. You're gonna go against some guys that can't walk and chew gum at the same time, and you're gonna make them look foolish. And in the SEC, you don't have many of those guys, but the where you pile up sacks and you get those plays are going to be the difference. And that's the thing for me, is that I know the SEC is about as close as you're going to get to the NFL. I really think that. I really believe the type of football that the SEC plays is going to be the most similar to the NFL, and the type of offenses you're going to see, the type of defenses you're going to play against. That being said, can he go up there and match up against those guys on a every down basis and hold up, not get injured? And everything it looks like, when he did it, he has the ability to do that. And there's some guys that are freaks of nature. Lawrence Taylor wasn't much bigger. He was a little bit taller, as all 6'2", 6'3", than Warren. But the leverage, the physicality, the speed, the explosiveness that this guy has in his hands, with his hips, and the fact that he has the ability to do a lot of different things, he would be the equivalent of what you would use as an offensive comparison, like a Chris McCaffrey to a defense. He would be a Christian McCaffrey's version of a defensive player, where I could put him at this position, I can put him at this position, I can blitz him, I can drop him. You never know where he's going to be. Very similar to what you see with Micah Parsons. Same type of player. Micah Parsons is going to drop in coverage. He's going to be able to bat some balls down. He's going to be able to cover some guys out of the backfield. But he's also going to, when he comes, he's going to be explosive up the field, and it's going to be a nightmare because he's relentless to get to the quarterback.
Well, I think the exact quote that he told me, that my buddy who works for, like I said, anyway, he works for the personnel department of a team that is known for nailing their draft picks. So, very sharp guy. He said that if Jalen Walker's there at number 8 and the Panthers don't take him, they're crazy. He said this dude won't come off the field. He's a leader. He's a hard worker. And the fact that he's grew up a Panther fan and grew up, in Salisbury right down the road even adds more to the allure. But he was like, if he's there, you got to take him. And he said, he is our kind of player. We would take him if we were there. He's that kind of player. I was like, wow. I mean, and he goes, and I liked him on tape going in, but I didn't love him. And then I saw the workout and I went, wow.
A lot of things we're talking about has to do with scheme too. What type of defense are the Panthers going to run compared to, maybe what somebody else or your buddy is a scout of? And I know who your buddy is, and I know what type of defense they run. So, it's going to be interesting to see, for the Panthers, how much, what's the word I'm looking for? How much ability are they going to give this guy to freelance and do his thing? Because that's what makes some of the greats great, and not every coach is going to give a player that room for error to go out there and make things happen. I give the coaches a lot of credit to guys, to players that have the ability. Warren Sapp was a guy, he would line up in a 3 technique, but he could take an inside rush and get back to the outside, and it goes against all the things that gap sound defenses are supposed to be, but he makes up for it with his athleticism and his ability to make plays. And Tony Dungy and Gruden, whenever he played for the Raiders, they allowed him to be able to do that. And, that's the one thing that it'll be interesting to see if, the Panthers, if they take him or whatever team takes him, if they allow him to be that type of player, because I think that's where he's most effective.
Yeah. Dan Morgan has said that they see him as primarily an edge rusher. So we'll see. He's another name too, that when I saw some of the mocks this morning had Jacksonville taking him. So, the other thing about if Jalen Walker is the choice, I think we talked a little bit about this on Friday, but the Philadelphia Eagles, who have just a dominant defense, have done pretty good on taking Georgia defenders. I mean, their defense is littered with them. I think they've got 5, if I'm not mistaken, defensive guys that they've drafted from Georgia over the last few years, and all of them are players. And so if you're going to flip a coin and you're not sure between 2 guys, I think if they play defense at Georgia and in the SEC, that's probably a pretty good way to lean. So it'll be interesting, because I've also saw some tape on him where people thought again that, he's just looks okay. He's not big enough. So it'll be interesting if that is the pick. And again, we'll talk to Michael Kaye from the Charlotte Observer about that in a little while. Great writer for the Observer. I actually followed him when he worked and covered the Philadelphia Eagles before he came to Charlotte. Being a Giants fan, I try to read as much as I can, and he did a great job. Funny guy, and really does a good job. So it'll be interesting talking to him about this. And something else that I want to talk to him about and get your thoughts on too, Frank, is right now, the teams have to decide if they're going to take the 5th-year option on rookies, that are still on their rookie contract. And we saw a team like the New York Jets today
let's make sure we're clear on that, because only the first-round rookie contracts.
Correct.
5th-year option. Not all rookies have that 5th-year option. Only the first.
Correct. Yep, correct. So we saw the Jets today. They went ahead and extended all 3 of their rookies, Sauce Gardner, and the other 2. I forget the really good receiver, and I don't know why I'm not remembering his name right now, but Wilson. But anyway, they selected the 5th year for all 3 of their rookies. There's a couple out there right now that the teams haven't said whether or not they're going to select, and both would, I think, make good additions on the Panthers. I don't know what you'd have to give up to get them. First one is Kayvon Thibodeau, the defensive end for the New York Giants. They took him, top 5 in the draft, 4 years ago, 3 years ago. His rookie year, he had 4 sacks. Second year, he had 11.5 sacks. Last year, 5.5 sacks. That I'm a Giants fan, so I watched all their games, and he's a frustrating player to watch because he's very athletic. To me, I always feel that he's given 100% out there. I don't feel like he takes plays off, but there's also plays where it seems like he misses more sacks by a second than any defensive end I can remember. This year, the Giants added Brian Burns on the other side of him. So I thought, man, that should open him up to have a huge year. And he only had 5.5 sacks. With that being said, if you're the Panthers and you can get, the Panthers are looking pretty with 2 picks in the 4th round and 3 picks in the 5th round. If you can get him for a 4th or 5th round pick, why not? You let him play that last year. And if he plays well, you keep him. And if he doesn't, you let him walk. He's a guy that I think would be interested that I want to ask Mike Kaye about. And the other one, and my gut tells me there's no way that the Panthers would even be interested in this because of the issues they had with the trade with the same team in the same position last year. But George Pickens, the receiver from Pittsburgh Steelers, who is a great receiver, tends to be a headache in the locker room for sure. And I don't think the Panthers would want anything to do with that piece of it. However, he's another one that they haven't picked up the extension on yet. And there's no doubt that you stick him on the Panthers team, and he's by far the number 1 receiver. It ain't even close.
Yeah, I mean, going back to Thibodeau and, what his abilities are, I've seen him play quite a bit as well. And, I've said this before, sacks are just a result of a play. And a lot of times it's not necessarily by what you're doing, it's by the result of the football play. And what I mean by that is that, in order to get sacks, unless you're one of those guys that's just the most elite pass rusher that can beat guys one-on-one and get up the field and cut that corner and, get to the quarterback, because quarterbacks are going to move. They're not going to sit on their spot when they feel that pressure. You have to have inside push. And that's the one thing that the Giants really, they have a run stopper, but they don't really have the pass rushing inside push, that, maybe some other teams might offer. And I think that he would benefit by going to a team that had, 2 good defensive tackles that were able to give that inside push, because that quarterback's going to roll out onto the one side or the other. And if it's to his side, he's going to be falling right into a sack, because he does get up the field very well and very explosive, but he just doesn't cut that corner elite like, some of these, great pass rushers have the ability to do. So that would help him out. Now, whether the Panthers are going to be that team or not, who knows? And that 5th-year option is just an extension. The other thing that could be happening with all of these players that aren't getting extended is they could be working or looking towards a long-term deal.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's something that we have to remember as well. It's just not that the team doesn't want them or that 5th year. It's just we want to work out a long-term extension, and we're doing that because we don't want to give up that money, and we want to make sure that we get you taken care of before you hit that 5th year, and other teams have the ability to come in and you go ahead and play it or sit it out, whatever it might be, and then get the big money, which we don't want to get involved with. So It's like we want to pay you earlier. And instead of getting to the end of that 5th year where now you're a free agent and there's nothing we can do about it, we still control, the terms as your contract holder. So as far as Pickens goes, obviously,
I know you watch a lot of Steelers, so you've seen this guy. I mean, he can play.
I mean, the guy can go up and high top anybody, Randy Moss style. But he also can drop 2 balls, and then if you're not throwing to him, get upset and do something stupid, right? He's a loose cannon that can frustrate the hell out of you or make you the happiest person in the world, right? It's like, do you live with that or accept the bad with the good? Because with the good, there's a lot of it. I mean, he has the ability of unlike a lot of other players, 6'5", 6'6", he runs like the wind and go up and get it and make plays. And if you're watching Steelers games, you just want them to throw the ball up, jump ball style, and have him go up there and give him an opportunity to do it. The problem is with that is that sometimes he may not be in the right position. He may not be doing the right thing. He may be taking a play off, and it might, run into an interception or, something like that. So that's the negative part with that. Now, I think that, that's just something that a coach has to be willing to deal with and hopefully have a good leader as quarterback. And I think that was the number one reason, honestly, why Russell Wilson was brought to the Steelers was to kind of control and help with that mentorship of young players like Pickens. So is Bryce Young that guy? I don't think so yet. I think that Pickens would get the lion's share, but is he going to be the guy that works the hardest? Is he going to be the guy that shows up? Is he going to be the example for the younger players on this team? Is he going to be a good example for Leggett? Is he going to be, one of those guys that's, able to help grow these players? And that's the question you have to answer if you're going to take on that risk.
Yeah, and and again, we'll talk to Mike Kaye about this, but Dan Morgan and Dave Canales have both on record said that they really like this wide receiver room. It doesn't mean they're not going to add to it, so they're not saying that, but they like it. Adam Thielen is as consistent as you can get. He's where he's supposed to be. He is a great mentor and leader. I mean, him and Leggett have become great buddies. He's taken him under his wing. Leggett, even though he had a hot and cold rookie year last year, showed some flashes, and we all expect him to take that leap this year to becoming a good receiver. Jalen Coker had a really good year last year for a kid that wasn't even drafted. And again, tall, fast, can jump. Thielen's been working with him, and then David Moore, the veteran who they kept, so there's going to be an addition to this wide receiver room. There's no doubt in the draft. I would think in my mock draft, I had them using their second round pick for a wide receiver. I had them taking Jalen Noel, but there's about 4 or 5 guys right there, depending on who you like. If they want to go wide receiver, that they could probably grab. The receivers seem to die down if you wait after the 3rd round. The depth in that at that position seems to fade away. But I would, again, I'd be interested if we had to put like a percentage on positions taken by the Panthers in this draft. I think everyone would agree 100% defensive lineman / edge. There's 100% they're going to take one of those. And I would almost say it's 100% they're going to take 2 of them. but linebacker, I think you'd have to say very, very high percentage. I would say DB, whether it be safety or corner, very, very high percentage, if not both of those. And then as you work your way down, I think receivers probably around that 60%, maybe to 50 to 65, 70%. Running back, I think we all think they will take one late, but again, lower down the road. So I think that, if you're Dan Morgan and you're coming in here and, you brought this up Friday, and since you brought it up, I've been studying nothing but this position. You brought up, what are they going to do at linebacker? I mean, we know they have Jewell, who's solid when he played, but was hurt a lot. But we know he's not a game changer. He's a solid player. We know that Wallace had a solid rookie year, getting thrown in quicker than they thought he would have to. Had a solid rookie year, but you're right. I mean, linebacker, and they did sign. They signed a couple. The Jones kid. They really think he's going to be a good outside. So maybe he's an answer, but they're. They've got it. There's no way they're not going to draft a linebacker in this draft. And again, looking at
what we said earlier, really, when you're looking at killing 2 birds with 1 stone, who's the player that does that in this year's draft? Jalen Walker. If you're looking to kill 2 birds with 1 stone and have a great rusher at edge rusher that also can drop in coverage and do it better than Jalen Walker right now as the defensive end can drop and cover better than any linebacker that we have right now.
Yeah, no doubt.
So, when you have the ability to do that and impact 2 positions with 1 player, right? He can't do them both at the same time, obviously, but you have the flexibility to run and use that as a defensive coordinator. I know I can drop him in coverage and he's going to be just fine, if not better than anything we have, or I can bring him off the edge and disguise something and have him come, or just line him up and rush him, right? I mean, I have a lot of options I can use with him. I think the order of priority for the Panthers is number 1, defensive line, defensive end, right? Pass rusher. Number 2, linebacker. Number 3, tight end, right? And that's the 1st, 2nd, 3rd round in my book, in the way that things would work out in a perfect world scenario. If the player that the Panthers really like is not there at defensive line or defensive end, then I think that you could easily, argue for a Tyler Warren type of player, a guy that's going to, be a Swiss Army knife. Linebackers, I don't know if you'd take them unless they're going to be a game changer and have the ability to play every down. And nickel, they can cover better than anybody. They're going to be a great leader. They tackle. They're sure tacklers. They're physical enough to stand up against a goal line defense. With a goal line defense, I just don't know if that linebacker exists. I think the linebacker for Alabama could be there in the 2nd round. He's the guy that stands out, 6'3", 250 pounds, ran a 4.5. Big body, good hips, athletic guy, played at the SEC level. Played for a good defense, good coach. Nick Saban obviously going to get the most out of him. And, he could be a guy that the Panthers take in the 2nd round. But That first round pick has to be a game. He has to be a game changer. He has to be a difference maker. He has to be able to do multiple things and come in and play right away. And that's the reason why I like flexibility, and I like the ability to, do multiple things. That's why I like Warren. That's why I like, the kid from Georgia.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see him. And listen, we're only at Monday, and there's going to be a lot of things that happen before then. Whether it's going to be some pre-draft trades, some of these guys get their options picked up that we talked about that maybe are off the trade board now. You're going to see teams fall in love with. I mean, look, Jalen Walker's a perfect example of somebody who teams seem to be falling in love with the closer and closer we get to the draft. And his teammate, Mike Williams, who worked out at the same pro day, a lot of guys are blown away by him too, So
well, let me go ahead and say what I learned. I was doing some research last night. We're going to talk about the draft today, and a lot of things that the players, that positions that we need. And Mike Williams is the guy that I didn't realize had a serious ankle injury in like week 1 of the season and still played through all of those things. So he didn't nearly play with the explosiveness that he has the potential to play with. And I think he got better as the season went on, and it turned some heads. I think, and also he's 6'5", 270 pounds, runs well, come off the edge, but he's an every down player that can get it done as well. So, and he played at Georgia. So, those are all the things going for him right now. But I think he could be a player that, that the Panthers could absolutely would love if they fell to him, especially in the second round. But if they could get him in the, later in the first round after a trade.
He ain't going to make it in the second round. If they get him, they'd have to take. He'd be a trade back candidate, in my opinion. If they traded back 8 to mid teens, or he'd be a guy. Yeah, he'd be a guy there. I know the Falcons have been attached to him pretty strongly, because they pick in that 16 or 17 range. I'll give you a couple linebackers that when I was doing some research this weekend, just on the depth in the draft at linebacker that stood out a little bit. Who I remember watching during the season, thought they were good players, but hadn't really thought much about him until this weekend. The guy you're talking about, Jahad Campbell for Alabama, he would be great. He can rush the passer, all those things. I don't think he's going to make it to the second round either, especially not where the Panthers pick, which is late.
He's not a pass rusher. He's a middle linebacker that can rush the passer when you call a blitz.
Yeah, but my point is just very athletic, can cause havoc. Then Carson Schlesinger, who we talked about on the show the other day, he's the kid from UCLA. I went back and watched a lot on him this weekend. And man, he really does remind you of Dan Morgan. I mean, he's just a tough, gritty, fast side-to-side player. And then I'm going to give you 2 other names. And if I had to bet you that one of these guys will be drafted by the Panthers, these are 2 guys I would bet the odds on, whether it be, second, third, fourth round, wherever they go. But Demetrius Knight, the linebacker from South Carolina, is a dog, man. And we all know how Dan Morgan and this Panther team loves their players from South Carolina. They love their players from South Carolina. I mean, obviously we know they went with Leggett last year, but they have a history of South Carolina guys. And they went to the pro day for these guys in South Carolina, watched them work out. Obviously we have scouts that go to those games. The personnel guy that I talked to last week loves this kid a lot too. He thinks he's a dog and a guy that Dan Morgan would like, and probably a third round kind of pick. And then the one that would be interesting for me is Barrett Carter, the middle linebacker from Clemson, because again, really tough player, durable, fast, tough, but the Panthers have never drafted a player from Clemson, which shocked me. And I know that's probably just a fluke, because, I'm sure if they could go, if they were able to draft Deshaun Watson when he came out in the draft, they would have taken him. If they could have drafted, Etienne, there's so many Clemson guys in the league. So I'm not saying they don't draft Clemson for any other reason, but it's just funny. They've never drafted a Clemson guy. But Barrett Carter's a guy who, again, probably in that third or fourth round would be there. And then I know they also have shown interest in Chris Paul Jr., who is the linebacker from Ole Miss, not related to Chris Paul, the basketball player that went to Wake Forest, because I Googled that to make sure, because obviously that seems just way too of a coincidence. But those are a few guys I think linebacker that if you're a Panther fan, you write those names down, and it wouldn't surprise me if one of those guys ends up on this team somewhere, like I said, with that late second round pick or your third round pick. And here's the other thing: the Panthers are going to have so many options when it comes to moving up and down. I mean, they've got 2 picks in the 4th round, pick 111 and pick 114. Then they have 3 picks in the 5th round, 140, 146, and 163. So if they want to move up, they've got the ammunition to do so when you've got 5 picks in the 4th and 5th round alone. So if they want to make some moves up, they've got the ammo. And if they want to make moves down, then obviously they're just going to be picking up more ammunition. So I would bet you the Panthers are going to be one of the more active teams in the draft for this draft that starts on Thursday. I think they will be one of the most active, maybe not in the first round, I think, but in day 2, I think you're going to see them make several moves. And in the first round, I think it's really just going to depend on what team wants to jump up to their spot. And I think that a lot of that's going to have to do with what happens before the Panthers when it comes to the quarterback position and maybe the running back. If Genty somehow falls to number 8, there's a lot of speculation that Denver Broncos would move up to the Panthers to get Genty. They need a running back and they like him a lot. There's speculation the Cowboys who are smoke screening everywhere, but obviously they need a running back. The Panthers signed their running back from last year, Dowdle, and at 12, they could take Amarian Hampton, the running back from North Carolina, who everybody loves and thinks is going to be a really good running back. But a lot's just going to depend on who falls to that spot.
Why would Dallas or anybody move up if they know the Panthers don't need a running back and they know the Saints don't need a running back? To a position to get a guy when he could just fall to him. Why would they?
Well, here's one reason why. Denver, for instance, drafts after the Cowboys. So if Denver wants Genty and he's sitting there, at number 8 or at number 9, then there's speculation that they may make the move to go ahead and go up and get him because they know Dallas at 12 needs a running back badly. Although most of the mock drafts you read with Dallas, they have them taking Ted McMillan or Golden, the receiver from Texas. Matter of fact, there's more mock drafts that have them taking Golden, the receiver from Texas, who I also like better than Ted McMillan. But they have them taking them at 12. So a lot of it's just going to depend on, what teams are in front of the team that's moving up. Like the Steelers, for instance, drafting at number 21. And if they really want to take Shedeur Sanders and he happens to be there at number 8 when the Panthers are picking, and knowing New Orleans Saints are at 9 needing a quarterback and not knowing who they prefer over Shedeur Sanders or Dart, or whoever, the Panthers, I think, are in a really good spot. It's just going to be a matter of how far they're willing to move down and then what position they're going to target when they do move down. And then the other interesting, the NFL invites, I think it's 16 or 20 players to come to the draft on, the first night. You always see the players sitting there with their agents and their family. This year, the draft's in Green Bay, and they're doing it right there at Lambeau Field. But a lot of the big names that are going to be drafted early chose not to go. But one of the names, only 2 quarterbacks, by the way, are going to be there, which I think is very surprising in a draft that everyone thinks there'll be probably 3 or 4 first-round quarterbacks drafted. But Cam Ward's going to be there, and again, everyone knows he's going number 1. The second one isn't Shedeur Sanders. It's not Dart. It's Milroe, the quarterback from Alabama, and you talk about a polarizing guy. You've got everyone agrees that the guy's not ready to start right now. So everyone's on 100% page on that. But you've got some people thinking that in 2 years from now, he's going to be by far the best pick after this draft, or best quarterback that was taken in this draft. Faster than Lamar Jackson, better arm, blah, blah, blah. Yes, he lacks accuracy at times, but from an athletic standpoint, they think he's great. So Mike Kaye from the Star Observer is going to join us in just a second. We'll take a quick break, and Mike Kaye from the Star Observer will join us right after this, talking 2025 NFL Draft and the Carolina Panthers.
It's time to suit up. Here's your host, DJ the Suit Stout.
Welcome back, Suit Up Sports. I'm DJ the Suit Stout, along with Frank Garcia and Mike Kaye from the Charlotte Observers joining us right now. Talk a little NFL Draft, Carolina Panthers. Mike, how you doing?
I'm well, guys. How are you?
Doing good, man. Thank you for joining us. I know that from watching your Twitter feed, not only have you been knee deep in draft coverage, you were also in the little WrestleMania going on, and I didn't get to catch any of it, so I followed it online. But just your overall thumbs up or thumbs down?
I would say thumbs in the middle. It just felt like the most forgettable WrestleMania of all time, but there were two really good triple threat matches. The one that opened last night and the one that closed the night before I thought were pretty great.
Awesome. Yes, I was following you this weekend, and some of my other buddies who were all they didn't leave the TV all weekend watching it. But it was McAfee at this one, I think.
He was, and boy was he felt. And listen, I mean, that man didn't take a breath, so a lot.
He's
Frank
good
knows
at
what I'm talking
about. Well, thanks again for joining us. Frank and I have been talking the draft this morning, and talking about some things that seem to be getting a little tougher to decide as we get closer to the Panthers pick at number 8. I was reading some articles this morning and some mock drafts this morning that had Mason Graham possibly falling there to the Panthers. And I wanted to start with you on that one, because I think most people feel that Jalen Walker is the guy that the Panthers are leaning towards at number 8. But if Mason Graham's sitting there, what do you do if you're the Panthers?
You take him.
That's what I think.
Period. You win this game by winning in the trenches. Big people beat up little people. And if you're a team that couldn't stop the run to save your life last year, this was the worst rushing defense since 1980. They were the worst scoring defense ever, granted with an extra game. We don't have a lot of sample size there. And I think you just build in the trenches. Could you imagine Mason Graham next to Derek Brown?
Man.
Rotation to the left. I think they would love for that to happen. I think he is one of the legit blue chip players. I think the reason why he would fall is he is not aesthetically pleasing.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think his natural talents are his natural talents. I don't think anybody was I'm trying to think of a really good example of that. Dontari Poe wasn't the most aesthetically pleasing guy, but he was a really good player, and he could run and do a bunch of things, and he was athletic as heck.
Yeah.
I think the issue with Jalen Walker that the national side has not really taken into account is context. Okay. This defensive staff has preached length and size for 2 years. Ejiro Evero, in 3 years of being a defensive coordinator here in Denver, has never been in a rush to start a rookie. When you take a hybrid tweener player, you are building your packages around him. And I think Dan Morgan said that he saw Jalen Walker as an edge. That's smart, because that adds positional value to that pick. It adds positional value to him, but it's a projection. He's only kind of done it as a third down sort of guy. And I think he's a terrific talent. I just don't know that this is a terrific fit for him, just with all the context and variables that we can connect with.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I think that was one of the things I was arguing, is that, if you're going to take a guy like that, does the system fit his skill set? And when you look at a guy that has the ability to impact a team in a lot of different ways, you're right. You're going to build your packages around that guy. And if you have a coordinator that isn't willing or isn't comfortable with, maybe taking that step or that leap of faith, because they don't really necessarily count on that rookie yet, it's going to be a tough fit, regardless of how good of the player is. And I think that factors into, as much as, guys wanting to pick guys and their guys more than anything else that, we could sit here and talk about or discuss when it comes to this guy's good. They're all going to be good players. They're all good athletes. How do they fit your system?
Yeah, and I think something that needs to be kind of taken into account too is Evero should be on the hot seat, right?
Right.
You don't do what you did. So here's what happens. You draft Walker. He barely wants to play him that first month, let's say. He wants to give him time. And then Evero's gone. Or what if they all excel and Evero's gone after that year? He gets a head coaching job. Well, when the new defensive coordinator comes in, he goes, I don't really see that guy as an outside linebacker. I see him as an inside linebacker, similarly to what Vic Fangio did with Zach Bond.
Mm-hmm.
And then it suddenly changes up the chemistry and science of your defensive depth chart. I think for me, I'm somebody when production meets persistence meets timing and numbers, or excuse me, and testing, that's where you go. To me, I think the best pass rusher in this class is outside of Carter is Donovan Ezra from Boston College.
Yep.
15.5 sacks last year. He had 13.5 sacks his first 3 years. By the way, he had 2 years where he surpassed Shamar Stewart's entire total.
Exactly.
At Texas A&M, and for some reason, we're not talking about Ezra like he is a top 15 pick. I would take him at 8.
So I was going to ask you, if he was there at 8, you would prefer him over Walker at 8?
Yeah, because I want some. I don't want a projection there. I would want somebody like this defense failed immeasurably, and I just to me, it's just I don't know, man. I just don't. I don't see it.
Michael,
go ahead,
we talk about the defensive side, quite a bit when it comes to the Panthers and their needs because of what you said. Historically, one of the worst defenses, maybe to play in the last 25, 30 years in the NFL. But if you're going to get better and you're going to do it at a rate higher than everybody else, because everybody's going to have the ability to draft and get free agents, and everybody's going to be incrementally better. How do you separate yourself to be much better than the next person? And I think you got to take a chance at a guy, that might be able to do multiple things and be a Swiss Army knife. And Chris McCaffrey, several years ago, I thought was a great pick for the Panthers, because of that. Tyler Warren from Penn State, I feel like is a guy that can impact defenses from a schematic standpoint where you're going to have mismatches regardless of where you put him on the field. And the emergence of Bryce Young late in the season, I think would really benefit a guy like him, Bryce, to be able to have a guy like Warren that he can throw the ball to. And you look at the great quarterback receiver combinations, the one thing they all have in common is they have a tight end that can make plays. And I think that the Panthers right now are lacking that. I know they signed some guys back, but they're not the guy. In order to have an impact on a team, and especially with where the NFL is going on the offensive side, I think he would be a great fit for the Panthers.
I agree. I just don't know if the positional value matches the way their philosophy goes. I agree. I think he would be among my 3 guys on that list. I also think there is a genuine chance that he is not there. I think the Jets are going to have interest in him. I like Loveland too. I look, tight end's in my favorite position. So I'm all for taking a tight end in the first round. That said, I think they're going to really prioritize defense. Now, maybe there's a shot that the board falls a certain way and they take Ted McMillan or they take Matthew Golden. But to me, it's really interesting to see the way this board falls out, because really once you get past the top 5 non-QBs, there is a very similar rating system off the board. And so if I were them, I'd want to trade back, because adding a day 2 pick plus one of those guys on a similar plane is better than just getting one of the guys on that plane, right?
Yep. What do you think as far as the trade back scenarios? Because obviously there's a lot of talk of what the Giants are going to do at 3, whether Shedeur Sanders is the pick or Abdul Carter, with the Saints picking right behind the Panthers and needing a quarterback. So it does seem like they're going to be in a position to trade back if they want to. If Genty were to fall, for instance, to number 8, there's been talks that the Broncos would want to jump up ahead of the Cowboys. What do you think would be the most likely trade back scenario?
Well, I think if there's a run on offensive tackles to where the first 2 are off the board by 8, I think you could see a team like the Dolphins or the Cowboys jump up. They've just lost veteran offensive tackles. They also need help at guard. From what I understand, everybody has a different rating of the top 3 tackles. That's Kelvin Banks from Texas, Will Campbell from LSU, and then Armand Membo from Missouri. I'm under the impression that Will Campbell's the favorite to go at number 4 to the Patriots. I think the Raiders and the Jets will be in on the Missouri offensive tackle. And then, if you're Jerry Jones or you're the Dolphins and you really want to reshape your offense, maybe you want to go after Genty or you want to go after the number 3 tackle before there's a massive drop off after those guys. And I would actually dispute the ability to trade back in this. I think it's actually going to be much harder to trade back in this draft because the value is so equal. You're either going to have a very specific need to want to trade up, or you're going to have to be desperate. And luckily for the Panthers, there are some suckers in this situation. I think Dallas and Miami can be put in that category.
Yeah.
Chris Greer is very desperate. They're about to trade Jalen Ramsey. That team has not won a playoff game since the last millennium. Like this is it. And I could see them trying to make a splash. They've traded up in the past. I just think, like, if you're the Panthers, you also have to be creative. Like, if I went to you and I said, hey, opposing team, do you still want to pick on the second round and trade up? Cool, let's swap second round picks. We'll bridge the gap between, our pick, and they don't pick between 9 and 56. So we'll bridge the gap, and we'll take on a third round pick and maybe some change. If you can do that, everybody wins, in my opinion.
Right.
Sorry.
Mike, you mentioned you already won my heart over because you came in and said, what wins games is blocking and tackling, and you're 100% right. I think Dan Morgan knows that. Any other ex-player knows that have played in those trenches. You know that the offensive line is the heartbeat of the team, and the defensive line is the lifeblood. Where if you don't have those two guys, like the Philadelphia Eagles, you're playing for second place, and they're just going to win more than they lose. But for the Panthers, let's talk about the tackle position, because the left tackle is a younger player, obviously. Maybe has not lived up to the hype of where he got drafted out of NC State. And right tackle in Moten is near the end of his contract. I can't remember if they extended him or not, but
they didn't.
He's making a lot of money. Is there a potential that the Panthers look at that, and if one of those guys that you mentioned, from Texas, from Purdue or from Missouri, dropped to them, LSU or Missouri dropped to them, that they might take that position as well?
I don't think that that's out of the question. I think they're trying to be fluid with their decision making. I don't think that there's a guy at number 8 that they love, no matter what, unless like Mason Graham falls, right?
Right.
I think for them, so there's a scenario. It's not likely, but there's a scenario that neither one of the tackles is back in 2026 because they have to make a decision on Ikwanu's 5th-year option, and then Moten's playing on the final year of his contract. So like they're set for this year. They also have Brady Christensen and Josh Nijman, who can both be serviceable backups. The thing is, though, you have to kind of figure out cost control long term. Top offensive tackles are getting paid between $25 and $27 million, and if you don't want to pay that to either one of these tackles, you want a cost controlled guy. And what GMs will tell you: offensive tackle, quarterback, defensive end, wide receiver, and in some instances, cornerback are the positions you really want to cost control for a few years because their markets are booming. And so I wouldn't completely rule it out. I think it's more likely they take a tackle in the later rounds just to develop, just because that guy's probably not going to play this year. Mm-hmm. But I do think you're on the right track. I do think they're trying to keep their options open, and they don't have to decide on that 5th-year option until a week after the draft. So they have like some incognito type, programming there too as well.
Yeah. Speaking of the 5th-year options, Frank and I were talking a little earlier today. I know the Jets picked up 3 of their guys today on their 5th-year options, but 2 of the names that haven't been picked up yet, and it doesn't mean they won't be picked up, but 2 of the guys that I think would fit on this team. One would be Kayvon Thibodeau, the defensive end from the Giants. If they were to take an Abdul Carter, I'm a Giants fan, so I've watched every one of his games, and there's times he looks great, and there's times I was telling Frank earlier, I feel like no one's missed more sacks by like a half a second in their career than Thibodeau has. And you've obviously seen him enough too, covering the Eagles and all that. But if they didn't pick up his 5th year, would he be a guy that if you're the Panthers, and again, I don't know what it would even take to get him, maybe a 3rd pick or 4th or 5th, and they obviously the Panthers are loaded up in the 4th and 5th round with extra picks. Would you take a flyer on a guy like that?
I think it'd be tough because I'd want that 5th-year option, but then you have to make a decision that week, right? So you're automatically locking this guy into a 2-year contract that's going to have an astronomical jump the next year. Then again, they'll have more cap space next year. So, I think it's if you could trade one of those 5th-round picks for him, sure, go for it. If it's anything more than that, I wouldn't touch him.
Mike, I want to ask you a question about Bryce Young, and it's kind of either lead into another question after you answer, or you'd answered it and it'd be like, okay, that kind of answers my question. And the question is that, do the Panthers trust Bryce Young to be the guy going forward?
They trust him to be the guy this year, and then it's an evaluation process. I don't think. Here's what's weird about this team. As much as you could feel good about maybe somebody like Jalen Coker, or whether the jury is out on Xavier Legette. I think this is a constant evaluation. Derek Brown, J.C. Horn, they're evaluated. I think everybody outside of the cornerstone pieces like Chuba Hubbard and Robert Hunt, they're all being evaluated. And that's the right way to go. They were 5-12 last year.
Yeah.
I don't think Bryce Young had a great year last year. Even his second half, I wouldn't call it great or good. I would say it was encouraging. And so what he needs to do is he needs to be more consistent. I do think that he has been kind of underwhelmingly suited with weapons. That said, I don't think you can just make that excuse. I think part of the issue, though, is the defense giving up 31 points a game, and you're not going to win games like that. So they need to cut that by like 8 to 10 points. And that's why they're going so heavily on defense. And so I think, the perspective is like, has he been underserviced? Well, if your argument is that Evero was underserviced with talent, and that's why you retained him, I think the same argument can be made for Bryce Young. That said, Bryce Young costs a lot more, and you don't want to be in QB purgatory. I think he's trying to earn his fifth-year option this year.
Yeah.
And, that's one of those things where it's like, I think that's still up in the air.
What do you think the Panthers do? Frank and I were discussing that, the linebacker position, obviously getting Derek Brown back at the defensive tackle is huge. Robinson had a good year last year, and they brought in Wharton from Kansas City. But the linebacker position for the Panthers is at is a spot where they've had a tremendous history of great linebackers on this football team. And now it's hard to name the three linebackers on this football team. And Wallace had a solid rookie year last year for a guy that got thrown into the fire a lot quicker than we expected him to. Jewell played solid when he played, but he got hurt a lot. They're obviously not going to take that linebacker guy because if they do think Jalen Walker is an edge, then, he wouldn't be one of those guys. Second round, like you mentioned earlier, they don't pick until 57. Is there a couple guys that I know the kid from UCLA is somebody that a lot of guys like, but do you think that's a position that they have to address probably within the first few rounds?
Yeah, I think that's a fair argument. I think Carson Schlesinger, the UCLA linebacker, fits if Monty Kiffin was still like coaching, you know what I mean? And like if in the prime of his career, that's the type of linebacker he'd want. He's so good in coverage. You can play that Tampa 2 style. Yeah. But also I think he gives you options to where he could be a dime linebacker. He's that good in coverage. Like you're not going to have to move a safety there. He's got a great mentality. He grew up idolizing Luke Kuechly, which I don't know that I've met a linebacker in the last 4 years
that didn't say that.
Yeah. I do think they have to address it early. I don't think it's necessarily a top 2 pick sort of thing, but I do think it's something that they really need to keep in mind. And I think they're going to have options. This is a decent inside linebacker class. But these guys, you can't just be like a finesse linebacker. You just can't be like this athlete. You're going to have to be able to tackle. You're going to have to be able to read and react, seek and destroy. Like that's the type of guy they want. They want guys that are just going to bring dudes down because last year they had no teeth. And part of that in having a very honest conversation with Dan Morgan, I wrote about this earlier this month, was like the defensive line was getting nailed into their lap. And that's part of the reason why they didn't succeed and that you're not going to succeed that way. So hopefully with Wharton being back and whoever they add in the draft and Bobby Brown and Derek Brown and all those guys, that solves that problem. But I do think they need to address linebacker.
Mike, how big a draft is this for Morgan? This team and this organization, because I think they've done a really good job. I would probably B+, A- in free agency. I would say draft has been underwhelming, C- to maybe even I would get to be generous a C, but I could even argue a D when it comes to it. But it's been below average, in my opinion, when it comes to the draft.
Yeah, I think it was interesting. Last year was kind of a tale of two halves. Like I think you were really encouraged by probably the first half, and then everybody hit a rookie wall, which for a staff that calls it a developing staff, that's kind of problematic. That said, I would agree with that. I think the drafts have been somewhat underwhelming. I think Jonathan Brooks was a poor gamble. But I also think this draft, look, they were given a lot of grace last year. At 5-12, nobody was banging down the door saying all this. And it started out as pretty much as bad as it possibly could. But I think it is a relatively big draft, right? You're picking top 10. You have 9 draft picks. You're supposed to be known as the evaluator and a ball knower. And I think it's big for the scouting department. Like, I think, this team has a history with this scouting department of not, delivering. And I think, for some teams, it's very easy to nail early picks and just flail the rest of the way. Some teams are really good at nailing, day 3, and that provides a lot of depth. And then you sign guys and whatever. This staff is kind of in the middle of both of those things. So it's like, you've got to find your niche. And I think Dan Morgan is a very good evaluator. How collaborative does he want to be? How much is he going to listen to the analytics? How much is he going to listen to the cost of the opportunity cost of everything? I think all that needs to be considered. I think Brandt Till's a really sharp mind and a really good number 2 for him. But to answer your question, I think it's a pretty big one. I don't know that it's monumental. I don't want to be hyperbolic, but I do think this is the plan has always been reset the offense year 1, reset the defense year 2, and then year 3, you're going to have a smorgasbord of new talent that's built around an impressive core. And in order to get there, you really have to nail your picks. And so they know that. I think internally they are taking the right process. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, you covered the Eagles for a while, and you talk about a team that nails their picks and then just fills in the holes like we saw them do last year, adding a Saquon Barkley. It would be great as a Panther fan to one of these days be in that position, because it's been a long time. And you look at the list of second and third round draft choices by the Panthers over the last 15, 20 years, and it's hard to find a player. I mean, they have missed a heck of a lot more than they've been successful in the second and third round. First round picks, they've actually had a decent track record on, but they've also been picking very high, usually, where it's harder to make a mistake. What round, we talked about the receiver room a little bit, and I know you've got to scoot, but I did want to ask you about receivers, because I know that, there's a lot of people out there that think the Panthers should be all over Ted McMillan, if he's there at 8. I think Golden is a better receiver prospect than McMillan, just my opinion. But that's a position that you also have to think they address somewhere, probably in the 3rd or 4th round.
Yeah, I think they'll address it on day 2. But I mean, Matthew Golden's my favorite offensive player in this class. He's got speed. He can set guys up. He's got yards after the catch. The issue with McMillan versus Golden is this. For this team, right? Frank, we talked about guys who are great prospects, but might not be the greatest fit for what they need right now and in the future. This is the slowest offense I've ever covered, ever. And I've been covering the NFL for 11 years as an NFL beat writer, much longer than that as a general writer. I used to be a draft writer. I understand what this team needs. And I would say that this team needs speed. And this team really badly wants to run the football. There's also a lot of West Coast principles. Well, if you have West Coast principles, you're going to want a guy who can take the top off the defense. If I'm a defensive coordinator and I know Ted McMillan is the X receiver, cool. Well, he'll get a jump ball, but he's going to go down the second that he catches it. I don't have to worry about huge yards after catch opportunities. So I'm going to stack the box. I'm going to create havoc for the run game because I know they want to run the ball. I'm not afraid of Xavier Legette. I'm not afraid of a big game for McMillan. But if you have Matthew Golden out there who can run a 4.29, who is averaging, 15 or more yards per catch, who reminds me of vintage Brandon Cooks, but probably doesn't have the personality quirks. I mean, that guy can deliver, and it opens up for everybody underneath. It makes your tight ends better. It makes your running backs better. It makes your slot receiver better. That to me is the way to go. If you're going to go wide receiver early, I would take Golden as high as 8. I would. If you can't get out of that move and you feel like you need to nail your wide receiver, but then again, the Panthers, have a coaching staff that the head coach who's a former wide receivers coach, an offensive coordinator who's a former wide receivers coach, a wide receivers coach who is a former Pro Bowl wide receiver. If those guys can't develop wide receivers, what are we doing here? And so, I could see them going later round. The guy that I like on day 2 is Kyle Williams from Washington State. He put up 17 yards per catch off of 70 catches. It's it's off 35 catches, but he had 70 catches and still averaged 17 yards per catch. So he's a guy that he doesn't have the best size, but I'm really interested in him if he slides to day 3.
Mike, let me tell you something, buddy. There's not many guys that have come on or I talk to that I agree with as much as I agree with you. I don't know if that's a good thing or bad.
I almost thought you guys must have talked before this, because I'm going, Frank is like smiling right now, because normally Frank would have argued with somebody 10 times. And I'm like, you guys are a match made in heaven.
Well, they say, so a beat writer trick is the offensive linemen are always the guys you go to for really in-depth quotes and smart feedback. Well, there we go.
Yeah. The apple doesn't fall far, my friend. The apple does not fall far.
Yeah, but look, I think great minds think alike. I think we're both probably very old school in building the trenches on out, and I think that's how this team wins. I think you can never have enough defensive tackles. You can never have enough offensive line depth. You can, and listen, in covering Philly, you'll learn that. I mean, like, yeah. So I think that's the right way to go. I like, but don't love Jalen Walker here. I get it, but I don't think it's like a slam dunk. I don't think anybody's really a slam dunk unless Mason Graham falls.
If I ask you right now, Mike, give me a player that is a day 2 or 3 guy that, regardless of the position, is just a guy that you've watched tape and studied that you think would be just a home run get for the Panthers. Give us a guy to write on a sheet of paper, so we may not have heard of him before, but you would love to see on this team.
Kansas running back Devin Neal. That dude put up 49 touchdowns in 4 years. We talked to Dave Canales earlier or at the owners' meetings, and he said he loved the steadiness that Rico Dowd and Chuba Hubbard provide because they have very similar strengths. Well, add another one to the mix. Like Devin Neal's a really productive player. He can be a really productive number 3 right now. And then if something happens with Jonathan Brooks with his rehab, or you don't re-sign Rico, like, he can be the number 2. Like, there's upside there. And I think he's a guy who's really good. Another guy I'd give you is Oklahoma safety Billy Bowman, who is an absolute ball hawk.
Yep.
A really good compliment to Ron Merrick. And I think he's a guy that fits into what they would do.
Do we have a guy on this roster other than Adam Thielen that can catch a punt or return a kick?
He can't even do that.
He can fair catch him as well as anybody. There's no gap.
Yeah, I mean, David Moore was the safe punt returner last year. Basically, if the punt was within the 20-yard line, you just fair catch. I mean, that's a pretty old school principle. Yeah. But Blackshear is back. I think he's going to face significant competition, and I think in those later rounds, if you're a cornerback who can return, if you're a running back who can return, if you're a safety who can return, etc., I think that'll put you in much better play to come here.
You think the Panthers draft a kicker?
Yes. I think so. They'll definitely sign or draft a kicker. Yeah. I think they'll draft a kicker if there's a run. Yeah.
Yeah. And what's the kid from Miami? I know is one that they've worked
Andres
out.
Borregales.
Yeah.
The guys to watch there are Andres Borregales, Ryan Fitzgerald from FSU. Ben Sauls is a left-footed kicker from Pittsburgh who's got a huge leg, but I don't know if they're going to be inclined to take a left-footed kicker, because if you're doing a competition, guys have to go back and forth if you're the holder. Yeah. I'm trying to think of who else you could probably look at. Tyler Loop from Arizona is another guy that is pretty highly regarded.
Awesome. Well, Mike, thank you for joining us. Tell everybody where they can follow you on social media.
Yeah, sure. So I have the worst handle in the history of social media. It is on X. You can find me at Mike _ E like in Evan _ KAYE. You can also sign up for the Charlotte Observer. We're running a great deal, $199 per month for your first 3 months. You can enjoy all the draft coverage and training camp coverage while you're on that kind of ride of $199. And then stick around, because nobody covers the game like us. We're big on analysis. We're big on storytelling. And our training camp notebooks are unlike anything you've probably seen in this market.
They are. They're great.
Hey, bud, you're under fan of me, and I'll be following you very shortly. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you again hopefully next week or two after the draft.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. All right, that was good. So let's do this. Let's just do a little.
Make sure he's hung up and gone.
Yeah, he's gone. Right? He's gone, right, Dale? Okay, he's gone. So let's just do this real quick. Let's just pick up like the interview just ended, and just wrap it up, because I got to leave in like 5 minutes. So we'll just do a quick wrap. Okay. Yep. You ready, Dale? And you'll just edit this, Dylan, to go right after the interview. Okay. Thanks, Mike Kaye again. Michael Kaye is the play-by-play announcer for the New York Yankees. But thanks, Mike Kaye. We like Mike Kaye a lot better. He did a great job, man. He knows his stuff, and he's not lying. The Observer's training camp reports are fantastic, and you and I both know because we've worked with the Observer for over 20 years, regardless of who the beat writers were. We worked with every one of them, and they were always our go-tos for training camp and draft and trade deadline, and he's great. And he covered the Eagles and saw them as they've risen to Super Bowl champions, and he knows the stuff, man.
Well, I'll tell you this about him. I think that he's one of the guys that I've ever heard, and we've listened to some great guys, that cover this team, but he's the one guy that I feel like, could, if he wanted to, end up in the front office somewhere.
Yeah, well, Marty Herney, that's the road he took. Remember, he covered a team, I think, for the San Diego Chargers, if I'm not mistaken, and then got into the front office of it. Listen, people can give Marty all the crap they want to, but he didn't miss first-round draft choices. Now, second, third rounds, he found a few nuggets in there, Ryan Khalil, but there weren't many. But first-round choices, he from Cam Newton to Julius Peppers to whoever, he did nail those, and hopefully Dan Morgan continues to nail the first-round picks. Hopefully they end up being late-round picks eventually because we're winning and making it into the playoffs and further along. But he threw out some interesting names, man. And listen, I know Thursday night you and I will be sitting somewhere, whether it be my theater room or a bar watching the draft. We're going to come on live and do some coverage. The Panthers are scheduled right now, probably pick around 10 o'clock. After talking to Mike, though, I tell you, like I said earlier in the show, the Panthers are one of the teams that a lot of people predict will move down. And like he said, it won't be easy because, there's a lot of depth at a lot of these positions that teams can wait a little longer on. But if you're a Panther fan, you want Genty to fall. You want a left tackle to fall. You want you want Shedeur Sanders to be sitting there at number 8. You want a Ted McMillan to be sitting there at 8 because a team like, and he mentioned two in particular, the Dolphins and the Cowboys, which, the Panthers wouldn't even have to go that far back. The Cowboys picked 12th, and I think the Dolphins might be 14 or somewhere. So they wouldn't even have to go that far back to where some of these names that we're mentioning as options would probably still be there. I don't know if I'll tell you this though, man, it's funny how when you talk to different people, Jalen Walker is some people love him. Some people don't think he's going to be that good. Some people think he's got to be this linebacker. And he made a good point about Dan Morgan talking about seeing him as an edge because it does add positional value. Doesn't necessarily mean that's where we're going to play him. And it kind of reminds Walker, now that the more I've studied and talked to people, Walker almost reminds me of a guy that if they are going to draft him, that they end up using almost like their Frankie Louvu, who they lost to the Redskins, because, it's probably similar in size, fast, strong, tough, aggressive. And Louvu would rush the passer. He would take, he would go out in coverage. So maybe some of that's just been a little smoke screen by Dan Morgan and to add positional value if they do take him.
I think he also makes a very good point, valid point, is that you have a coordinator that may not be sold on surrounding their entire game plan around one rookie. They want to see if he can do it a little bit more before they start selling the farm and saying, and claiming he's the guy. The athleticism, I think, is there. All the other things, all the intangibles that we look for are there. It's just the football player has to be able to show up, and they have to be able to trust him that he's going to be able to be that guy to do that. And it sounds like, from what Mike said anyways, is that, with the D coordinator, just not liking to play young players like that and surrounding the entire game plan around them, it lessens that type of value of the Frankie Louvu that you would normally have.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, and I think the Panthers are in a good spot. Let the draft come to them. If there's a guy that they really want to take a shot on at number 8, they're fine with that. If they get a good enough offer to move down, I know they definitely want to move up higher in that second round to address whether it be another defensive lineman or linebacker or receiver or whatever. I think they sit in a good spot to kind of let the draft come to them. But we'll be back with you Thursday. We'll be live on social media, so we'll put some tweets out and stuff ahead of time. But look out for Frank and I. We'll do some stuff during the draft. Hopefully the Panthers pick around that 10 o'clock area. If not, we'll be on, I'm sure, whenever they make their draft choice. We'll try to pace ourselves with our beverages so that we can still be understood when we give you our breakdown. But everybody enjoy a great Monday, and we'll see you Thursday.